Hey everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just going to give a minute just for people who are still drifting in. I can see people still joining now. Okay. Yeah, it looks like everyone's drifting in now. So yeah, thank you very much for joining today. So today we've got a CoffeeTime QI webinar on measurement for improvement. So we've got just 30 minutes today, so quite a bit to pack in to this 30-minute session. So we'll get started right away. So I'm just going to kick off with a little bit of housekeeping. So firstly, a couple of introductions. So my name's Andrew, and I'm going to be leading the webinar today. And I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie. So Sophie's joining me. She's available on the chat and also on the Q&A. So we'd love to have any interaction via those mediums. So we've got the chat. Feel free to say hi in the chat, tell us where you're from, that sort of thing. That would be great. If you do have any specific questions, pop them into the Q&A, preferably, and either Sophie will answer them as we go, or we will address some of those as well if we have time at the end of the session today. Final point of housekeeping is that the webinar is being recorded. So if anyone needs to duck out for any reason, then you can get a recording of the webinar and you will be sent an email in about 24 hours after the webinar's completed with the link so that you can access the recording. So yeah, feel free to do that. If you want a refresher on it, go back and look at that recording once again. Okay, so let's get underway. So the agenda today is around measurement for improvement. So I should say, obviously, measurement and charts and everything, that's quite a big topic. So what we've actually done in our CoffeeTime QI series is we've split this topic into 3 individual webinars, each 30 minutes long. So we're on the first one today. If you're interested in the others, there's the 2 on the right-hand side of the screen here. We've got one coming up on the 14th of May. So that's an introduction to improvement charts. So recommend that. And then looking even further ahead, 12th of June, you can come and learn more about how to interpret your charts and what that's telling you. So yeah, Sophie will share some links for how to do that and go and sign up for those, but recommend sort of getting the whole trilogy, if you like, of these webinars. But for today, we're looking at the agenda on the left-hand side. So firstly, we're going to have a quick look at why we measure things in improvement work. Obviously pretty fundamental. We're going to have a look at how we decide what to measure, the different types of measure you might come across in QI, might want to think about. We'll briefly touch on common improvement chart types. That's really just an introduction to the next webinar on the 14th of May, which is more in depth on that. And we will also then look at how frequently we might want to collect data in your measurement. And we will also create a quick measurement plan in Life QI together before then just wrapping up with some learning resources and any questions. Okay, so let's get stuck into this then. So firstly, why do we do measurement and improvement work? So measurement helps with a number of different things as you're trying to drive improvement. So the first one on the list here is around understanding the current state. So you need to understand, obviously, what's happening right now. Perhaps that's how you're identifying problems, issues, things that could be improved. So obviously understanding that gives you your sort of baseline on where to improve from. Second to that is you're measuring things to see if the changes that you make in your improvement work are obviously leading to an improvement. So you're probably using things like PDSA cycles So you want to see, when you implement those, which ones of those are leading to improvements in your process or your system. And also, this is obviously an important part for many reasons, but not least, it sort of adds a bit of justification to what you're doing. If you have to show this work to other stakeholders, or you're looking to spread this elsewhere, or maybe there's costs involved with some of these changes, then you probably want to help justify that with some of the measurement that we're going to look at. And then the third piece is sustaining improvement. So once you've made an improvement, you want to make sure that is maintained, and maybe other adjustments are needed. So that's an important element of measurement as well. Then on the right-hand side, we've got two key types of data, which you're probably familiar with. So we've got quantitative data. So this is any sort of quantities, amounts, ranges. For example, you could use waiting times, things like that. So things you can directly plot on a chart. And then we've also got the qualitative data, really important in QI as well. So things like patient feedback, things that give you a bit more understanding of opinions and feelings and such like. So we'll mainly concentrate on the quantitative in the examples today, but that's not to say qualitative isn't really important in the process as well. Okay, so how do we decide what to measure in a project? So there's a few things to consider here. So we're just going to go through these briefly, and then we're going to move on to a couple of other slides. We'll go into a couple of these in a bit more detail, and then we'll dive in to LifeQI itself. So first thing to think about when you're deciding what to measure is, or first thing to consider is the alignment to your aim. So obviously, you only really want to measure things that are important and are going to help. There's a temptation to measure lots of things. That's not really always that useful, but you need to make sure what you do measure obviously aligns to your aim. So if it's going to help you tell the story of whether your changes are leading to improvement, then it's probably going to be a good measure to use. Next up, and this is a really important one that can be overlooked at the start, is how feasible is it to collect the data for your measure? So, is the data already available, or is it going to be easy to collect? If it's going to be really hard to get hold of, then you probably want to think of measuring something slightly different. And if you're measuring, say a really big population size, for example, if you're doing a measure around staff satisfaction, let's say, you're probably not going to survey all the staff in your organization, but you might have to sample that and look at how you could come to a more manageable number of people there a number of staff there to measure. So there's sort of a sampling element in there as well that can be useful. Number 3 on the list is thinking about clarity and consistency of the measure. So is this something that can be measured on a consistent basis, whether that be, week by week, month by month, whatever that is, but needs to be able to be done consistently, get the information from the same places to ensure that data is kind of useful, really. And obviously clarity in terms of, other people need to understand what this measure means as well. So think about that and what it means to different stakeholders and such like as well. Okay, then we've got frequency of data collection. So we'll go into this in a bit more detail on one of the coming slides, but really this is thinking about how regularly you're collecting your data. So is it something you're going to be able to collect on a daily basis or weekly basis or something? And I suppose the key here is to find something that you can get regular data, but it's not going to be too much effort to get that, because the whole point here is not just to collect data, it is to make improvements. So you want to make sure that's a reasonable amount of effort for the data that you're gathering. And then we've also got another point here, which is sensitivity to change. So depending on what you're thinking of measuring, you need to think about how that's actually going to show or demonstrate to you that there's been a change in your data. So how sensitive is that metric? If you're running very short PDSA cycles, for example, then you probably want a measure. You're going to need a measure that is showing you improvement very, very quickly. And generally that is preferable. Like you want some early feedback so that you can learn things early on and then adapt and change. If you've got measures that take a long time to illustrate a change, for example, like a rolling average over 90 days, for example, you could collect that regularly, but it's still going to take a long time to show a real change in your data. So think about that when you're deciding what to measure as part of your project. And then we've got our different types of measures that are used in QI, and hopefully have a quick slide on that. So we'll just talk through this very, very quickly. So we've got 4 key types to measure, sort of, I guess, the 3 most common ones at the top, and then the 4th one down here. So for each of these, we've got kind of here listed the question that's trying to answer. And then we've got an example measure over here that I've just put in from an example project around reducing patient waiting times. So firstly, the outcome measure. So really the question you're looking to answer here is did this change improve the system, the process that we're monitoring? So this is normally, easiest way to think about this one is it's normally directly related to the aim of your project. So if you come up with a kind of SMART aim, which a lot of people would use, then you can think about the measures that are going to help you understand your sort of improvement towards that. So an example here would be the average patient wait time. Hopefully you're going to see that decrease over time. That's going to be pretty important. We then got our process measures. So these are the measures that are focusing on the processes and systems that directly contribute to your outcomes. So it's kind of like a leading measure for if you're going to see improvement in your outcomes. So are you following the right steps to reach the goal? The example here around patients receiving a text message for their appointment reminder. In this project, we think that's going to help to reduce patient wait times. So that's kind of a leading measure in that regard. And then we've got our balance measures. So think about, did the change that you've made, is that going to have unintended consequences elsewhere? And what are those? So yeah, in the example here, thinking about, with all these changes, is there going to be a reduction in physician-patient contact time, which you probably wouldn't want that being a negative consequence. So monitoring those things is really important as well. And then finally, we've got the structure measures. So this is more about, as you can imagine, the structural stuff. So are the right systems in place to enable you to make an improvement? So things like, in this example, the number of appointment slots that were available, and seeing that sort of process is all in place. We've then got different types of chart. And as I said previously, we won't go into this in too much detail today, because the next webinar on this topic is going to go into this in much more detail. But it's got 3 common types of, or categories of chart that are really used in improvement work here. So the first one being your sort of basic charts, pie charts, line charts, etc. We then got run charts. So this is kind of a default in Life QI, really. So basically a line chart plotted over time. Pretty useful for most types of data where you can plot over time. And then control charts, the third option here. So these give a bit more granularity and a bit more analytical capability on your data. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I recommend signing up to the next couple of webinars and get a lot more information on those types of charts. Generally, with the measures themselves, you're probably looking at, within a project, like a handful of measures is probably enough measures. You don't need to measure loads of different things or use every different type of chart, or whatever. Just pick what's useful basically for the project. Okay, final slide before we go into Life QI and have a look at building our measurement plan. So this is around frequency of data collection. This is always a bit of a tricky one to think about. It's obviously going to vary depending on the thing you're measuring. But I suppose the important thing here is just to be realistic about what you need and what's useful. Just use enough data, basically. Do you really need to collect something on a daily basis? Would weekly be okay? But equally, probably you're not going to collect data on a yearly basis because it's going to take forever to see any changes in your data. So consider that. Consider the timescale versus data sensitivity, which we talked a little bit about earlier. So you want to be able to see your changes on an appropriate timescale. So common frequencies that people use, things like daily, weekly, monthly, sometimes quarterly, but it does take a while to build up quarterly data points. So unless you're running a particularly long project, probably not quite as useful at that sort of length. So yeah, think about those. We'll have a look at that in Life QI in a minute. And then there's also a bit of consideration here about what sort of chart type you're going to use. Just because, for example, with a run chart, which is a common chart that people would be using, you need really, well, a minimum of 8, but more like 8 to 12 sort of baseline data points as part of your run chart. So, if you're doing quarterly data, that's at least 2 years worth of data just for your baseline. So that's a long time, basically. So think about the types of chart. If you're using an SPC chart, it's more like 15 in your baseline data measurement. So yeah, be even longer. So that's why sort of a relatively regular frequency is quite useful as part of the improvement work. And then finally, just the point that some measures might not have a set frequency. So if you're measuring something that's really rare, like falls, if you don't have very many falls, then you're probably not going to, add that up every week. You're just going to record that when it happens. In which case, there's other charts you can use for that. It makes that much more straightforward. It means you're not collecting data that's just a negative, basically. Okay. Right. So let's go in now to Life QI, and we will go about making our measurement plan. So hopefully most of you are Life QI users. If you're not, then Life QI is the web-based platform where we do all the improvement work. I'm just in here in our demo system, got this project I just made today. Haven't really populated it with anything yet, but I'm going to go into the measures area and show you how you go about setting up a measurement plan. So I'm going to add a new measure. Okay, so we've got our project is about customer awareness of QI tools. That's kind of what we're doing here today, and helping you guys. So I'm going to create a new measure around measuring the number of webinar attendees. So that's what we're going to be looking at. This is something that's going to be a process measure. This is hopefully going to help us see that we're heading in the right direction. If you need any help when you're going through and doing this for yourselves, you can see the guidance in the tooltips here. So for example, what different types of measures are, etc. Next field in the measurement plan is the operational definition. So again, come and use the tooltips. You can get a reminder of what this is, but really this is obviously defining your measure, trying to make it as clear as possible to anyone coming in and reading about your measure, exactly what it is, why it's useful. So in here, I'm going to put what measure means, which I've handily got just off the screen here. So this is how we define it. We're also going to put a bit more granularity there. So we're saying the number of people, it's the total number of people that join the webinar. It doesn't matter if you stay for 5 minutes. Hopefully you stay for a bit longer, but yeah, we're gonna count all the individuals. So that makes it really clear for anyone coming to read this exactly what's happening and what counts basically as a data point. Okay, then we've got our data collection plan. So this is pretty important as well, particularly if you're working in a team and maybe other people are involved in collecting data as well, because you want to make sure everyone does it in a consistent manner. So this is kind of like the who, the what, where, when, sort of what of the measure. So I guess in terms of the who and the what, this is how we're going to do this. So webinar presenter, we'll use our Zoom webinar analytics and see how many customers attended the webinar. So that's who's going to do it, what's happening, and then put in another line there that this is going to be recorded after each monthly webinar. So that's pretty clear then, exactly what's happening. If somebody else needs to come in, one of the other presenters on another webinar, they can see what data we're using, where it's coming from, and so on. Okay, we then got our chart types. So choose your chart type. I'm just going to leave it here on a run chart. And like I said, future webinars cover this in a bit more detail. And then we've got our data collection frequency at the bottom. So these webinars are monthly. So I'm going to choose a monthly frequency for this. Just pop that in there. You can see the other options here, sort of listed within here. Okay, next up, this is where you can link your measure to other elements of the project. So I don't know if any of you joined our recent webinar on driver diagrams. If not, you can go back and watch it on our webinar page. Go and have a look at that one. But if you've built a driver diagram, you come and link your measure to your drivers using this interface here. So just provides all the relevant linkage within your project, but you don't have to do that, obviously. Okay, and I'm going to create that measure in LiveQI. So here we are, we've got the measure, so measure. It's a process measure, we're using a run chart. We don't have any data in here yet. Won't go into that today, that'll be covered on the next one. But that's where you would see that. And then if we go into the plan tab, this is all the measurement plan information that we've just populated. Of course, if you want to edit some of that, you come and do that here using the edit details button at the top right. Okay, I'm just going to go back to our presentation now. Before we talk or sort of close out the last few slides, I just wanted to ask Sophie, have we got any questions?
No, not at the moment. Been a few in the chat, but I've answered them all. Just one around the links that have been shared in the chat and whether they'll be available with the follow-up email. And I've just said we could absolutely try and get them included. But apart from that, there's nothing else at this moment, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to those of you who asked questions. Yeah, so these are some learning resources that you might find useful. I think Sophie's shared a lot of these in the chat, and you'll have these on the presentation when you get it as well. Yeah, so obviously got our website. Generally, the blog, has lots of good resources on there that you can come and browse. Picked out a couple of articles, particularly related to measures, that would be useful. So come and check those out. Read those in your own time. If you are a LiveQI user, we've got more of the kind of practical how-tos within LiveQI. You come and access those through our help center. So here's a direct link into the measures and charts area of that here. They come and learn about some of that stuff. And then if you've got any feedback or you need any support, you can always contact us, help@liveqisystem.com. Or if you're using LiveQI, then you can use the live chat feature in the app as well. Okay, so just a couple of minutes left. Just enough time to remind you about the next couple of webinars in the series. So we've got the registration link here. I think Sophie shared that as well. So recommend signing up for those. Again, 30 minutes, get a bit more information on the charts, how to interpret your charts, and hopefully that'll be everything you need to sort of crack on with measurement in your projects. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. Look out for the recording that will be coming by email in the next day or so. And yeah, we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.